a lot of the cargo ships that were coming into the island, there was a port of entry for plantains, and through that same port of entry is where our African ancestors entered as well.
This is Ya Comiste, the show where authors reveal the meals and stories that shaped them. Today I'm sharing a meal with Melania Luisa Marte. She's a poet, musician, and the author of Plantains and Our Becoming, a collection of poetry that explores identity, culture, home, and belonging. Melania, so why did you choose Cibao?
So I chose Cibao restaurant because growing up on the Lower East Side, this was one of the only Dominican restaurants you could find that was in close proximity, and that you could pick up or they would deliver. So it just reminds me of not only home, the Lower East Side, but also the Dominican Republic.
Today we're eating from Cibao restaurant on the Lower East Side. It first opened its doors back in 1958 as La Lechonera, and since 1978, it's been known as Cibao, serving both Dominican and American food for generations. For our first chapter, we're eating Sancocho, a hearty stew with tender meat, root vegetables, and plantains, simmered together until the broth is rich and comforting. And why did you choose Sancocho to start?
So I chose Sancocho because Sancocho to me is one of the most traditional Dominican recipes. I think the recipe hasn't changed much. It's got your root vegetables, your plátanos, your yuca, your batata, which are super important in Dominican cuisine.
Amazing. Let's try it. It looks so good.
Yes.
So this first chapter is all about memory. And I'd like to know, what does the Sancocho remind you of, whether it's people, moments, or something you've written about?
I chose Sancocho because Sancocho for me is a metaphor for home. It reminds me of growing up in New York City. It reminds me of the summertime, the rainy days in the Dominican Republic in the summers. It reminds me of my mom sort of multitasking on weekends, cooking a sancocho and meal prepping for the week, and also doing laundry. And, there's a smell of fabuloso. And so it's just a very core memory I have of eating sancocho with my family and just feeling at home, feeling safe, feeling grounded.
Food shows up in many of your poems. What role did food play in your household?
When I chose to write about plantains, I knew that if I was going to do it, I had to, one, be respectful of and honor the legacy of what plátanos means to Dominicans, but also talk about the history of the island. And when I started looking at the history of the root vegetables and plantains and yuca and batata, I started really learning about why it was such a traditional staple in our diets. So when I was in Santo Domingo, I actually took a tour, and I learned that a lot of the cargo ships that were coming into the island, there was a port of entry for plantains, and through that same port of entry is where our African ancestors entered as well. So I wanted to honor that, and I wanted to talk about the symbolism behind it, because then our ancestors were also growing plátanos on the island, because plátanos grow in such a healthy way with the soil, with the humidity of the island. And I wanted to talk about how that was one of the staple foods because that's all that they were allowed to eat. Mm. And so they had to get creative. And through that creativity, that's where we get sancocho, that's where we get mango, that's where we get our mofongo, right?
Do you think that the way that you write about your culture has maybe changed from when you were living in the U.S. versus the Dominican Republic?
For sure. I think I had a little bit of an identity crisis, as some of us do, because I think when you're living in the States, you're narrowing in on your particular experience, but you don't know what that would look like otherwise, because you haven't experienced what it would be like to go back to your parents' country or your grandparents' country and understand what life would be like over there. For me, moving to the Dominican Republic for a time period gave me the space to unravel, to decolonize, to explore my culture and my identity from the root right, from the place where it was born. And so I'm super grateful that I got the experience and that I'm able to, raise my kids both here and there and soak it all in and really give folks, I feel at least, a more robust narrative of what it means to be Dominican and American.
Did you always feel like you were an artist, or was that something that you ended up growing into?
I've always loved art. I was like, whatever I am, I will be the Beyonce of that. Like in my head, that's what I always told myself. I was like, I loved music, I loved dancing, I loved theater. I was a big theater kid in elementary school. I loved plays. I loved anything that had to do with like performance. I was always very expressive. And so in middle school, when I got the chance to go to the New Rican Poets Cafe, our humanities teacher took us there on a field trip. And I actually grew up across the street from the New Rican Poets Cafe. So it was very interesting getting to perform a poem and then see adult poets performing. I was just like, whatever that is, I want to do it. And that's when I really started immersing myself in like poets like Maya Angelou, and like Langston Hughes, and really discovering that there was a world of poets out there. And I've been obsessed ever since.
And is there any poem that you remember that you wrote as a kid?
Yeah, there's a poem I wrote. It was actually when I was in the Dominican Republic. But it was like me copying my older cousin. She used to write poetry. She used to write her like boyfriend love letters.
Oh, okay.
And there was a poem about her wanting to kiss her boyfriend under the mango tree. And I was like, oh, this is cute. I want to write a poem like this. And so I like copied some of her lines and like then wrote my own version. My mom found the poem.
Oh.
She was like, you're 7 years old. What are you doing with this? So she was like freaking out. But I saw a lot of power in that because I was just like, these words struck a chord with her. She's so like upset. Obviously she's upset because I'm like 7 writing about kissing boys on their mango tree, which didn't even happen. But it's also like, it revealed to me that there was some kind of force within these words and within the storytelling. And I was just like, well, let me look into that. Because I had never seen my mom be so angry with me that I was just like, this is interesting. So through that rebellion, I discovered that I think I'm a decent writer. So I just kept at it.
To wrap up our first course, when you eat the sancocho, what word comes to mind?
So I have this phrase in Spanish, which is actually, it's sort of inspired by my book, Plantains and Our Becoming. And it says, al plátano volvemos, which is, to the plantains we go and from the plantains we become. But it's sort of, for me, it's like this idea that, certain things feel like home and certain things remind you to come home to yourself and to find solace and safety and find a haven within yourself. And so wherever I go, if I can find a plate of sancocho, I feel that.
For Chapter 2, we're eating arroz, habichuela, y carne, tender chicken served alongside fluffy rice and savory beans, a combination that's simple, filling, and full of flavor. Melania, this looks amazing. Why did you choose arroz, habichuela, y carne?
I chose arroz, habichuela, y carne because it's a staple in Dominican households and other Latino households as well. It's like one of the things you cook when you want a hearty Latino meal, but you also are struggling on time.
Let's take a bite. Delicious. I love that this restaurant, everything tastes like it's made at someone's house. Do you think food is a love language for Dominican people?
Absolutely. Dominican people are so rooted in having home-cooked meals. And even if you eat at a restaurant, you're getting home-cooked. You're getting that feeling of grandma or auntie or, uncle is in the kitchen, and you're getting that feeling of something being slowly cooked. Dominicans are very big on making their fresh sofrito, and that's why the food has that, like, the seasoning is so deeply embedded in the meat and the beans and, whatever you make. If you're making a moro or you're making rice and beans together, there is this sense of not only is the food fresh, but the seasonings are fresh. The sazon is fresh. The sofrito, where you're blending the cilantro, the green peppers, the red peppers, the onions, the garlic. So the sofrito is something that is a staple in Dominican folks' fridge, and it gives everything you cook that little bit of oomph that you need, And I think that's what makes it so special.
You've worked in multiple formats and styles, like poetry, an audiobook, narration, and you're also an educator and speaker. Do different mediums allow you to do something creatively that you can't do in the others?
Yes, definitely. I'm actually working on my novel, and so that's a whole different experience because you get to really be behind the scenes. You're not, front center. When I'm performing poetry, it's a whole different experience because I have to it has to come from me, but getting to just either be in the back seat or be in the front row, in the passenger seat, it's such a different experience. So I love getting to really listen to myself and really listen to what kind of storytelling I want to do, whether it's in music or whether it's in poetry, whether it's in writing, a chapter for a novel. I really want to allow myself to be creative and enjoy the process.
Before we close this chapter, if you had one word to describe Arroz, Habichuelas, y Carne, what would it be?
I would say savory. I think because you're getting so many different elements, savory and super healthy. I think this is one of the healthiest meals and balanced meals that we have in our cultures. I think when I'm feeling when I'm meal prepping and I'm feeling like I need to feel strong, I always go for a good meal like this.
For our final chapter, we're drinking a Batido de Guanabana, or sour sop shake. It's made by blending the pulp of the guanabana fruit with milk, sugar, and ice until smooth. The result is creamy and refreshing, with a sweet tart flavor and silky texture. Melania, so why did you choose a guanabana shake for today?
I chose a guanabana shake because my grandmother has a guanabana tree in her backyard, and it's one of my favorite fruits. It's also hard to find. Guanabana is a very rare fruit, at least in the United States it is. I love that they're tasty, they're sweet, they're a little sour, and you just really get the sense that you're taking in something that's not usually the norm here.
Our final chapter is all about tradition. Is there anyone real or fictional that you would want to share this guanabana shake with?
I would say I would love to share a shake like this with Toni Morrison, and I would love to ask her all about her spiritual practices and her writing rituals. I think she was someone who I admire in the way that she wrote so bravely.
Speaking of writing, in your poem, Afro Latina, you write about identity in a way that has resonated deeply with so many readers. How do you see poetry as a way of preserving and passing down tradition, especially around Afro-Latina identity?
I believe that poetry is political. I know a lot of people like to think, oh, but what about the love poems? There's something political about it. Love is political. The way we love, the way we show up for ourselves, for the people we love, for our family, for our lovers, for our kin, the way we show up is in every way political and is in every way allowing us either to expand upon what it means to be human or to close in and dehumanize each other. So I always write understanding that my words have meaning and have power, and understanding that I need to also do my job as a writer to tell the truth, to enlighten folks, to educate, but also to allow folks to do their own work. And so sometimes it's just planting a seed, right? It's just allowing folks to see themselves and to find strength in their own voice so that they too can show up for themselves.
Do you ever instill those same values in your children, and how do you go about it?
I've learned that being a mom, especially in this day and age, it's important to, one, teach your boys to read. And I think reading allows us the possibility of other people's stories. And through that, you're able to humanize each other, to have empathy for each other and compassion. And for me, storytelling is that. It allows you to get a glimpse of someone else's life and to put yourself in their shoes and walk through their path and see that we are more alike than we are different.
How do you think your writing has evolved throughout the years?
My writing has honestly gotten better, and that's not like a bragging thing. It's like I actually worked on it. I really worked on my form, worked on my flow, worked on making sure that the storytelling is as poetic as it can be, but also that I was able to be authentic to the stories in my life and the people in my life and the folks that I want to write about. And I mean, you tell me, do you think I did a good job?
No, I think you did a wonderful job. Actually, when I was in my Latino studies class in college, we actually watched some of your poems on YouTube.
Really?
We did,
Wow,
yes.
that's exciting.
So you've reached classrooms.
Thank you.
Full of a bunch of BIPOC kids who were super excited to see someone represent so much of like the frustrations we have about our own community sometimes, but in such a beautiful and delicate way, but also very strong. So I appreciate that.
That's so sweet.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
And with that said, what aspects of your writing would you want future writers, young writers, to pick up on?
I hope that reading my poems, because a lot of my poems are in Spanglish, and a lot of them, if they're in English, they do have elements of Spanish in there. I hope that folks will be inspired to not flatten their multicultural identities into something that fits into what is the norm. I was allowed to write in a way that still leaves room for specificity while also broadening the landscape of what it means to be a poet and a woman writer, especially a Black woman writer in this lifetime. So I'm super grateful to be in a community of writers that are doing this work.
As we finish up, what's one word that captures this Guanabana shake?
I would say I like the word libre. I like the word libre for this shake because guanabanas, literally, when they're ready, they're ripe, they will literally just fall they'll just fall. They'll just like, grab me because I'm about to fall. They're very like whimsical.
We finished our meal. We're at the end. And my last question is, what are you most hungry for, either in books, life, or in food?
I think right now I'm most hungry for love and humor. I think those are the elements I'm exploring in my writing and my personal life, is like letting the light in. That's why I wore my hot pink.
Yes.
Because I feel like we need more color. There's a lot of dullness happening in the world. There's a lot of hard times, crazy times, and our joy is necessary in order to survive whatever we're going through. And so it's always important to let the light in.
If you liked what you just watched, check out Melania's book, Plantains and Our Becoming, available through your local bookstore or library or at the link in the description of this video. Thanks for watching.